Thanks, Luke. Thanks for the warm intro. I just wanted to say, looking around the room, it's amazing the turnout that we've got, and it's humbling to be up here. I've only been in the associated with this industry now for probably the best part of 4 years, and sitting amongst people like Ray and all the people in the room, and I've made a lot of friends and network here. It's amazing to see the turnout that we've got and the experience in the room. In looking at sustainability, we started looking at this a long time ago as a business, and me, myself, I've got an engineering background, so I'm pretty pragmatic, as most of the people in the room are. And so when you talk to me about sustainability and so on, I sort of wasn't convinced. And so I did my own journey of exploration, and really learning about sustainability. I think what it means to me and what it means to Simba is that it ended up really being about family. There's a lot of family businesses in this room. They've put their blood, sweat, and tears for generations into what they're doing, similar to Simba. And I think sustainability really, when you boil it down, it's about providing a better future for our children, right? For our families, for the next generation of people coming through. And so, that's really what I wanted to talk about, is that shift in mindset. And I think that's a very important part of looking at sustainability because, as laundry providers, you're going to have issues with energy, you're going to have issues with water, you're going to have a lot of practical issues, some of them not your fault. There's legislation that can come in that affects your businesses, all of these things. But really, I had to have a bit of a mindset shift to say, okay, well, what's this about? Is it important or not? We can just go to the... So, 2015, I'll give a little bit of a history about sustainability. 2015, the world gets together, everybody's in arms, they all cheer, and they say we're going to have net zero. It's been about 8 years. Hasn't been a lot of progress, unfortunately. Countries haven't been able to get together and say, hey, you know what? We're all going to commit to this. Australia has recently committed and said we're going to be net zero by 2050. But really, there hasn't been a lot of progress. What this was what's talking about is climate change and what's happening with temperature, and we can see, the climate change and how it affects us all. If you're in Queensland, I think now you'd be luckier probably going to casino and betting on what the weather is going to be like. So every time I talk to Adam, it's either flooding or it's either drought or something's happening that affects them, and that affects all your businesses directly. We saw in Dubai a couple of weeks ago, they had half a year's rainfall in one day, but not half a year's rainfall of Dubai, half a year's rainfall of what would fall in the UK. So that was a year and a half's rain in one day. So the whole country stopped, everything stopped. The next week they had sandstorms, right? And what it's about is what's happening here. So when we talk net zero, it's about average temperature around the world, right? And all we're talking about is a couple of degrees. If everybody had committed to what they said in 2015, we'd be on that green trajectory, and we'd be looking at a 1.5, or no change. We'd avoid the 1.5 degree change. Today, and this is what was shocking for me, is that we're pretty much already at that 1.5 degree. Nobody talks about it. We don't know. We just see the effects of it. It affects all of our businesses, and it affects what we do. And I can see that coming in the future, there's going to be a little bit of knee-jerk reaction to this, right? If we don't do anything at all, we're at 3 degrees, catastrophe, we don't really need to worry because we won't have businesses, we won't have anything to do. The climate change will be that horrific. But we're on the trajectory there of the middle right now, right? So what does that mean? I sat down with Mel, who's one of our experts on sustainability, and I said to her, look, I'm confused. There's too many things to look at. I really can't compartmentalize all of this. And so we sat and did a mind map that looked a lot messier than this. And we came up with really 4 areas that affect us all when we're making decisions now in terms of sustainability, right? So the first one is net zero, so that goes back to what we just spoke about. But then we got human rights and labor issues, so your sheets and towels that we sell to you aren't made in the best countries for human rights and labor issues. So that's something we have to look at. Circularity, which is on everybody's mind. What happens with these sheets and towels and so on and all the garments that you guys process and everything at the end of life. And then nature positive is the new one now that everybody's starting to look at. So alarming to me, I was at a conference and they were talking about nature positive and farming was bad. Who would know? I didn't know this. right? I thought farming was great. But it's about making sure that we preserve the natural resources that we've got, right? And so this is a shocker. 1.2 billion tons of CO2 equivalent emitted annually, accounting for 10% of global greenhouse gas emissions. That's just by the textile industry, right? And all of us rely on textiles to have our businesses, yeah? More than 800,000 tons of leather, rubber, textiles were discarded in Australia in 2018, 2019, with a recycling rate of just 7%, right? So this is one now, if you're in the laundry business and you're signing up new contracts and so on, you're being asked now, well, what are you going to do with the linen when it's done, right? Is it going to go into landfill? How much of it is going to get recycled? So all of these things we start to think about. Textile production is estimated to be responsible for about 20% of global clean water pollution. Cotton's very thirsty. Takes a lot of water to produce cotton. Takes a lot of water to process cotton. Takes a lot of water to wash cotton products, right? So water is a big issue for us. And then between 200,000 and 500,000 tons of microplastics from textiles enter global marines annually, right? Nobody's fault. We wash the textiles, polyester is made of plastic, microplastic comes off of it, goes into the water, it's becoming an issue, all right? And then finally, when we look at global survey, a slavery index estimates 27.6 million people were held in forced labor in 2023. So, if you're making stuff in places like China, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, this is a big concern for us, right? And we're being asked now as providers, we're being asked as suppliers, you're being asked as providers of a service, well, where does your stuff come from? Can you ensure that there's no modern slavery in that supply chain? What are you doing about it, right? So when I look at the areas of impact, there's climate impact, and that's going to, that provides impact on things like raw materials and cotton and water supply and all of these things that everybody in this room relies on. We look at customer demand now as building. So we're all dealing with the same customers and we're talking to them and they're saying, well, what are you doing about it? And unfortunately, it's being left to business more times than often to come up with the solutions for this. So Ray touched on, legislation, and it's better for us to work as an industry on working out what we're going to do when he's talking about standards, instead of having someone hand it down to us and say, well, this is what you're going to do moving forward, right? So, and then regulation is definitely imminent, right? We can see now that I think this last year and in the last couple of years, there's been a lot more regulation and a lot more discussion about regulation in this area than ever before, all right? So you think of things like mandatory climate-related reporting. This is a big one. We've just put in software for all of our climate reporting now. I know that most of you are doing the same. You're going to be coming to me and saying, well, Scope 1, Scope 2, Scope 3 emissions. What are you doing about your Scope 3 emissions? Your Scope 3, Ahmed, tell me what you're doing. So all of this, and the other thing I just want to point out to everybody is just like our financial reporting is audited, what's coming down is that our ESG reporting will be audited, all right? So when we get our books signed off at the end of the year and whoever does our auditing, all of those auditing firms now and banks for lending and so on are all employing people that are specialists in ESG, all right? And they'll be asking, what software do you use? What format do you report in? What do your suppliers do? And they will come and ask us questions about all this, and we have to be ready, all right? Modern Slavery Act, Simba, is very proud that we already started putting together our modern slavery statement a couple of years ago, even though we didn't need to. And we wanted to be ahead of that, and we've been working on making sure that that's something that reflects and means something in our business. And Heaton, who really pushes us hard on this, and most of you guys know Heaton, Kamal is here in the room. We call him the heart of Simba. So he is our heartbeat in the business, and he really pushes us to get all of this right. It's no coincidence that we've called this Simba Conscious, when we talk about our sustainability program, because it is a consciousness within our business. And so, yeah, we've been way ahead of the curve on that. And now we're seeing national waste policy action plans, national plastic plan, all of these things that are starting to take shape, all right? So we want to be ahead. So how are we responding? What does that mean for Simba as a business? Well, when we looked at this, we said the hardest thing is to figure out through all of those things that I said, those 4 areas, what are we going to have in terms of a framework, right? And so we looked at what frameworks were available. This is the UN SDG goals framework that's being used globally and is being used by most organizations now. This started off with about 10 goals. Now there's 17 goals, and the goals are there, and they're designed to say, well, if we can achieve some of these goals, the world's going to be a better place for everybody, right? So whether it's in Australia where we're consuming a lot of this product, where it's being made, where it's being shipped, that's what this is about. And so we've then sat and looked through our business and said, well, what can we do about it? And we've come up with 4 pillars, right? So one, and I'm reading really squinting here, is about building sustainable supply chains, right, is our first pillar. The other one is product stewardship, right? The other one is partnering for impact. And then empowering communities. And under those, we've said to ourselves, okay, what are the things that we can actually physically do that are going to be meaningful? And then what goals are we going to put that we have to commit to? Because there's no point talking about this stuff and saying we're going to be great without any goals that are tangible, right? That we can commit to, that you can hold us to. Yes? And so under our first pillar, building sustainable supply chains, we've made a couple of commitments. The first one is by 2030, we want to be 100% compliant to local labor laws in our textile production supply chains. Now, that's not an easy one to do when you're looking at the countries that we work in, right? So now our teams are becoming experts on those countries. What are the local labor laws? Are our suppliers adhering to those? How do we audit them? How do we make sure that we're doing the right thing? And I don't know, I mean, most of the people here I've met and spoken to about Simba, but for those who don't know, we've got our teams overseas that work for us, right? So in each of the countries that we work in, we've got our own QA teams and we've got our own procurement teams. Now, those guys aren't just about getting us the best price or getting the best supplier agreement or anything like that. They make sure that we give consistency to the product that we provide, but also that they're in those factories every day. Right? And so when we say this is what happens in that factory, we're not doing a Walmart and saying, listen, I'm going to be coming to CLS on the 28th of June at 6 o'clock because we're going to be auditing you. All right? Well, what do you think is going to happen? Our guys are there day in, day out, having those discussions, and they're supportive discussions. They're not a stick discussion. We're sitting with the suppliers, and we've explained to them that as they adopt these things and become better suppliers, well, guess what? They're going to have a better business anyways. Okay, and it's the right thing to do. So by 2030, that's what we're saying we're going to do. The second one we're saying is all manufacturers meet or exceed Simba's published emissions and water benchmarks, right? So this is, again, a big one because we have to remain competitive. We don't want to narrow the supplier market that we have. But lucky for us, we've got long-standing partnerships with the suppliers that we use. So we won't post this unless we've had those conversations with them to say how we're going to achieve this, guys. This isn't just a Simba goal. This is a goal now for our partnership as a supplier with you, which then feeds into what you guys are doing, right? It feeds into the product that you guys are going to use. And that's really important, and it's a long-term vision. We're saying by 2030, so now we're saying, okay, for the next 7 years, which will run out pretty quick, this is what we want to do, okay? And then the last one on here, we said 80% of our products, suppliers, meet and exceed Simba's ethical, sustainable, and environmental procurement standards. Now, how we do that, and I don't know if most of the people in the room know, we actually have Simba standards that we've put out for all of our suppliers, right? And they're audited on a monthly or quarterly basis, depending on the volume that they do. And we publish those if any of our customers want to see. We can show them our audit reports. And it's something that has been developed by our procurement team and Heaton over the years to say, if you're going to be a Simba supplier, here's the first benchmarks you got to go through. And I'm not talking about a page or two. This thing's like 20 pages long, all right? So we ask a lot of questions. We work with them on rectifying a lot of things. But it's not easy to become a Simba supplier, right, and start making sheets and towels and products for us. So you won't see us chop and change that supply very easily. There's a qualification process that they have to go through, but at the same time, it still has to be competitive, right? So that's what that's about. Then when we have a look at our second pillar, and get this to work properly. We talk about product stewardship. Now, product stewardship is one that came from our R&D lab. It came from our procurement teams. It came from most of the business as they work with our customers on new products. The whole point behind this is why don't we make them at the beginning so that they work really well for our end goals, all right? So now when we're sitting and designing products with our customers, we'll sit down and say, well, yes, there's form and function that we all can identify pretty quickly, but what's going to happen at the end of life, right? What's going to happen in terms of the sustainability goals that we want to achieve? And that's a great one because then it puts us on the front foot when we're making the product in the beginning in the first place. We're not rectifying something that's happened in the past. So we'll work closely with the teams and our customers, and we've got many examples of our R&D teams working right now on new products and new developments and new innovations to be able to achieve these goals as we go along. And the second one is, so, as a goal, we've said, okay, 100% of our product range and packaging has been assessed against and meets circular design principles. So now when we're designing our packaging ahead of time, when we're designing our products ahead of time, we're looking at circularity as one of those things for sustainability way ahead of time, right? It's not a reactive thing. When we're looking at least 60% of customers understand best practice in use care and end-of-life opportunities. So this is now a collaboration education piece. My guys, I don't expect him to go be talking and saying, here's a towel, here's a sheet, this is what it does, here's the thread count, here's the standards, all of the things that we all know. Now, they're expected now to have a conversation about sustainability. What are your end-of-life goals on this? What's going to happen with that product, all right? How's it going to be used, okay? And so that's a second level of discussion now that they're starting to learn to have. And our customers, are the ones that are giving us the great ideas. They're the ones that are using the product all the time. They're the ones that are faced with those issues when they have to get rid of their linen. There's cost involved. There's sustainability issues involved. So all of that comes really from that collaboration that we've got with our customer base. And then 80% of product offering will include a take-back scheme. So if we sell you something and we're contracted together, we're saying that by 2030, we're going to be committing to 80% of that we want to be able to take back. Yeah? Now, if I can offer that to the industry and the people that I deal with, that's a big one off your shoulders, all right? And so now what we're doing is talking to companies that are doing recycling of textiles, that are separate, looking at different technologies. Is the answer going to be, we're going to take it back to cellulose and polyester chips and so on? What are we going to be doing? And we're heavily looking at these things as an added expense to our business, right? And Reese is nodding his head. I'm sure he'd love for me to come and say to his business, hey, you know what? You can buy it off me today, and I'm going to take it off you tomorrow, right? One less headache for him. So, and we're being asked by our customers to look at these things. Now, we don't have the exact solution, but we're making the commitment that that's where we're going to be, right? So that's what product stewardship's all about. The next one, and this one I get to enjoy a lot of, is partnering for impact. So I don't know if you know, but most of the major organizations that we deal with today have a chief sustainability officer, have a head of sustainability, have people that are already doing this sort of work in their own industries. And so what we want to do with this pillar is partner with them and say, hey guys, this is what we're doing. This is what we've figured out so far. What have you done? And it's that collective collaboration that I think will bring more solutions to the table in this area, because not one organization has the answers for all of this, right? It's very complex. There's a lot of facets to it. And when I see what other organizations are embarking on and doing, I spend probably, 10, 15% of my time now going, getting educated, meeting with those customers, meeting with those people, and learning as much as we can that we can bring back into our business. And vice versa, whatever we can share, we're very open. And so similar to what we do here in the LAA, and everybody open their laundries and is showing everybody what they do, that's exactly what we're doing in this space, right? We don't want there to be any secrets because it has to be collaborative. So when we look at partnering for impact, at least 80% buy-in of Simba Conscious program with our contracted customers. So my contracted customers today will be hearing from us in the next couple of years, how do we partner together? And that becomes part of our contract, part of our agreement, part that we are working together to achieve these goals. or achieve the goals that we define together that are more practical for whatever they want to achieve, right? So we want 80% of our contracts to include that, right, moving forward. And that's the commitment that we're making as a business. When we look at least 25% reduction in the carbon footprint of our sold products or by project. So now and again, we're not just worried about, okay, I got an order, I've sold the product, it's out of my warehouse, I'm done, we made some money, that's great. What's going to happen with the carbon footprint of that product? How are we reducing it? And we've already done a lot of work in terms of carbon footprint around our business and around our supply chain. But you can see here we were very specific on saying products sold and projects moving forward, because we didn't want to just tick a box and bank what we've already done, which makes it a lot harder because now we're at the pointy end of that. And then achieve and maintain carbon neutrality of our scope 1 and 2 emissions. So this is us now as a business, our own scope 1 and 2. We want to get to, by 2030, saying we're carbon neutral, right? Which I'm sure is going to be a common goal amongst most businesses in Australia. If Australia is committed to 2050 being carbon neutral, I can't see how we're not going to be doing the same thing. Yeah? And then this last one really is, when we talk about empowering communities, this one's very close to all of our hearts at Simba. If you know the owners of Simba, they came to Australia with very little. They came from the countries that we now import from. When we look at immigrants and immigration into this country and so on, there's a lot of community work that we do and can support. Also, there's a lot of healthcare organizations that we support in terms of medical research and so on. So the first one is exceed best practice indices for diversity, equity, inclusion for Simba Global employees. Now, that's just not in Australia. That's in Australia and in India and in Pakistan and China and Singapore and New Zealand and the States, wherever we have Simba people, right? We count all of them in that. It's easy to be diverse here. It's not that easy to be diverse in Pakistan right now, right? It's not that easy to have inclusion in some of these countries that we work in, yes? And so when we're talking about a global approach to these goals that we've got, yeah? 70% of staff are engaged in at least one community initiative each year. I love this one, yeah? So by 2030, we encourage all of our staff members, come and tell us what you're doing for the community. You're going to go volunteer for a couple of days. You're going to work with the basketball team down your area. You're going to work with the homeless or the disabled or this. This is a beautiful one across the business, right? Like just in Australia, we've got 60 people working for us. Well, there's 60 different associations that they could have, yeah? And everybody's got massive buy-in. As soon as we announced this to our staff and our people and anybody who's working at Simba, they were blown away, right? That we're going to support them to be able to do that, yeah? And this is real stuff giving back to the community. It's not ticking a box. It's something that means something to the people that work for us, right? And when they feel that they can do that for their community or their kids or their suburb or wherever they live, then it starts to mean something. So in all of what we're doing, it's all about bringing our people into what we do. And then 5% of annual profit from Simba Global donated to create 1.5 times impact, right? Now, just so everybody understands, this one, I've never seen this ever in any organization I've worked for, and all of you have family businesses. Basically, what we're saying is the owners of Simba, Kamal, his brother, his sister, sat down one day and said, 5% of what we make every year is going to go to charity. That's a huge number, right? And as we grow, it's going to be even bigger. That's the commitment they're making as a family, because it means so much to them, and they believe in it, right? So that's something that we can be measured against. We'll report on what we've done. We'll report on that 5%. It's not something that we're just making up a number and say, hey, we're good people, right? And that's how much we feel about giving back, right? We think it's great karma for our business. We think it's the right thing to do, and that's why we do it. And some of you have been associated now with Simba for a lot longer than me. Have seen how generous this family is in what they do, right? So that's what, we do for Empowering for Impact. I want just everybody to feel like, see, these are things you can do in your own businesses, right? It's not just, I'm not putting Simba up here on a pedestal, and we're not saying we're sustainability experts. We're way at the beginning of this whole process, right? There's still a lot more that we can do. But I want us as an industry, and when I look around the room, this industry behaves like a family, right? And a lot of this should mean something to the people in this industry. Coming in as an outsider 3 or 4 years ago, there's not a laundry in the country that hasn't been welcoming. Come in, spend time, see us, see what we do. We'll show you around, right? I mean, they are the most welcoming people I've ever met, with each other as well. Right? It's not a cutthroat industry, which is great. So this is what we want to set as an example, that everybody here could do the same thing. Yeah? And I think that brings us to conclusion. So some of the things that we've been doing, actually. So the first one is reducing towel cycling times by up to 30% in some of the laundries we've been dealing with. What that means in layman's terms is I've got an R&D lab. I've got textile experts that work for us, like David, who we're very lucky to have. David's got probably 150 years experience in working in textiles there, right? And so he'll go and spend times in the laundry and say, you know what, you're over-drying your towels, you're over-drying your sheets. This is what we're doing. This is how we can bring it down. And when we've done that and we've given them things like moisture meters and calibrated with them and so on, the reductions have been massive. In some instances, we're talking about 30% more efficient processing in terms of reductions in energy and reductions in time, right? And you might think, okay, well, why are you guys doing that? From our point of view, it means the towel is going to last longer, the sheet's going to last longer, you're not burning the cotton, you're not destroying it, which kind of goes against selling more sheets and more towels, but we commit to a longer longevity of our product, right? Because we know it's better in the long term for you and it's better in the long term for what we're trying to achieve. Working to design new products that are quicker to dry, reducing the carbon footprint of our products. And this is a great one for our R&D team again. For our procurement team, they're sitting and working now with some of our customers and saying, okay, well, how do we make a product that dries faster, right? That requires less water, that requires less chemicals, that requires less, and so on, right? So Heaton's in China right now, for those, and this is why he's not here. I had a conversation with him. I think he was in tears that he wasn't here because he misses everybody. But he's looking at exactly this, you know, and he's sending us stuff going, check out this new product. This is what we can do, and blah, blah, and so on, right? And this is what we'll continue to do. So, you know, our guys don't just work from Australia. They'll attend conferences in China. They'll go to Heimtex. They'll go to Market Week in New York. They'll go all around the world. And this is a massive cost to our business, just for us to be able to bring back to Australia, hey, this is what's happening. This is what's new, right? And it's similar to the work that Ray was talking about when he goes to the Clean Show and he goes to all of these places and so on. He comes back and says, this is what I've seen. All right? So that's some of the stuff that these guys are doing. Investing in research to reduce microplastics. So we can see that this is a problem. We've put $5 million in terms of research grants with places like Deakin, RMIT, and we're working on specific problems that we think are going to be relevant for our customer base, relevant for laundries, relevant for, you know, where we all make our money and where we all eat and so on. And so microplastics is a big one. Right? How do you filter them out? Right? What are you going to do? And every time I look at it, he's because we know that if legislation comes down and says something, unfortunately and wrongly, people like laundries will get blamed. It's very easy to say that you guys are contributing heaps to microplastics. All right? Then what? So that's the sort of stuff that we're just trying to anticipate ahead of time. What can we do with the products that we're putting together? Right? Calibrating with laundries to filter out microplastics we're working on, but I also know that our guys will sit in the background and go, hey, listen, we've just discovered there's a biodegradable polyester. Who would have known, right? Biodegrades in 180 days. So now this gentleman's working on, with his knowledge of laundries, can we incorporate that into products that are going to go through CBWs, that are going to go through presses, that are going to go through dryers, and are going to go through ironers and still come out the other side without that polyester completely disappearing, all right? So that's the sort of stuff that they're keeping busy with, not just solving day-to-day problems, okay? And then we're also focused on reducing packaging. So this is a big one. Dwayne, who's our head of supply chain, who's not here with us today, but does an amazing job in making sure that, you know, we have a very strong local supply chain. He's very passionate about this one. So he walks around the business looking at any area, whether it's in the in the waste that we produce, but also in our packaging and how we produce our products for our customers, and how do we reduce and eliminate waste pretty much in our packaging, right? Where it's 100% recyclable and so on. So that's the sort of stuff that he'll work on. His job's logistics. All right, so that just shows you, I want to give everybody a little bit of a flavor of the culture of everybody around our business getting their arms around sustainability and how they can contribute and what they can do. And then, I just wanted to say, you have a partner you can work with at Simba, right? So we've demonstrated that a lot with the customers that we already have. We like to demonstrate that with the customers that we're trying to have. But even if you're not our customer at all, right? And there's an issue that you want to discuss, which happens quite a bit, I got to say, come and talk to us, right? If you've got a particular issue with textiles and you think the guys in the lab can help you solve that problem, by all means. If you want to talk about sustainability and looking at, how do we start to embark on this? It's an elephant this big. Where do we start eating? Sit down and talk to Mel. I've brought them out here for that reason, right? They're going to be at the stand. They're going to be here. I want to, come and introduce yourselves. I want them introduced to everybody in the room. Use the resources that we've got, right? And that's pretty much it. Sorry. And these are the guys I'm talking about. So in case you didn't know, they're just sitting over here. Raise your hands. All right? Most of you have dealt with Dave before, but Mel's a new introduction to our team as well. Okay? And thank you. I hope I've stuck the time. Any questions?
Yeah, microplastics. So this is a huge focus with government legislators at the moment.
Absolutely.
Webinar that the LAA is putting on next month, this month? June. I'm sure Sydney Water will raise this topic.
Yes.
And just so everyone's aware, the 80% of microplastics into the water system comes from tyres off cars getting washed off the road into stormwater.
There you go.
And yet, the legislators are focusing on microplastics coming off linen in laundry. So,
Absolutely.
very valuable that we continue the advocacy, work with governments, and gets the correct narrative across.
Yeah, and Ray's absolutely right. So one of the things that we're talking about from a board level now is having a committee around sustainability and looking at all of these issues. Dave's volunteered because we've volunteered him to head up that committee, so he doesn't know that. But we're starting. Thanks, Dave. Well done, mate. Good job. Yeah. But we're starting to form a committee in the LAA that then starts to look at these problems. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Earlier, production report. So